All right, this is Dr. Armstrong back again. Uh, we're in the third month of this year, and it's been a great year so far. I hope you've had a great year as well. Um, the year started out for me very, very well. Um, it's one thing to uh, talk about history and to be a student of history, but also getting the opportunity to talk to other people about it and telling them how important it is not only to us but to our future, our kids and our future generations. So, starting off 2025 was very interesting because I had the opportunity. I was asked by a friend of mine who helped me tremendously on during my dissertation work, accumulating some information that I needed in order to finish. And Lockhart, Texas, she lives in Lockhart, Texas, which is probably about an hour from here. And she asked me actually last year would I give a keynote speech for Juneteenth. And Lockhart, Texas, if you don't know, is what they call a freedom colony, meaning that emancipated African Americans migrated from different parts of Texas out to more rural parts of Texas in order to start their lives after emancipation, particularly after uh, Galveston, Texas, and the first June, was considered first Juneteenth, when Gordon Granger read the declaration that all uh, uh, Black people were free. I'm putting that in quotations. So I think there were over 500 was deemed freedom colonies here in East, South, and a little bit North Texas. So Lockhart, Texas is one of those places. And this elder asked me again last year to give a speech for their Juneteenth celebrations. And the good thing about it is, a lot of people didn't know about Juneteenth. And of course, it became a federal holiday a couple of years ago. But Black people across the diaspora have been celebrating Juneteenth for decades. And so we have to uh, make sure that people know that just because it wasn't a federal holiday, that doesn't mean that we weren't celebrating it. And it doesn't take a federal holiday for us to celebrate it. Just like a lot of cultural things that Black people do and other um, ethnic groups celebrate certain times befitting their culture and don't have a holiday, but you celebrate it anyway because that's culture. And Juneteenth was one of those things. So I told her, me and my wife was on a road trip last year, we're hitting different places, and I wouldn't be able to make it. And so coming up in January, she asked me, uh, every year they had, well, for the past 11 years, they were having a scholarship banquet for her deceased sister, who in her honor. And I think this year was the 11th annual celebration for her sister. And she asked me would I give the speech for that. And I told her I would be honored to. And it just so happened to be on the first day of February, Black History Month. So I was very honored to give that speech to the city of Lockhart, to that community, and uh, had an array of people come out. The mayor pro tem, city council people, firemen, um, other people of different civic groups came out, and it was just a great, great celebration. And the crux of my speech was talking about uh, how history continues to multiply over the years. And I talked about uh, how basic information of how Black History Month started with Carter Godwin Woodson, because a lot of people still are not don't know or not sure of its beginnings. And so I gave a background of that and talked about a few people who I think she asked me to talk a little bit about also African American labor, science, basically STEM. And I was able to go all the way back to uh, the Nile River Valley civilization and talk about the great Imhotep. And if you don't know that name, I would suggest that you look it up. The first great scientist of human civilization, Imhotep. And if you know about the uh, step pyramids uh, on the Great Giza Plain in Egypt, then and also the actual step pyramid at Saqqara in honor of King Joseph, Imhotep was the man with the plan for that. So it was a great occasion, and I really thank that elder for thinking about me and giving me the opportunity to talk to that community. I really, really enjoyed it. My wife enjoyed it. They enjoyed us, and we just had a great time. And we ended up going back a couple of weeks after that to another banquet celebration. Uh, Really, really a tremendous event because four gentlemen in the early 1970s started four black men started uh, an organization to provide scholarships for black children in that community because they saw the disparities that the scholarships that were being given out from when those kids graduated high school wasn't really going to black children. So these four gentlemen who were not rich at all, one individual still living, my good friend, Mr. Homer Williams, who's, I think he's 85 now. He and three of his friends who were just regular working men started a scholarship fund in the early 70s, and it's still going today. So we were able to honor Mr. Williams and those other three gentlemen who made transition uh, about that scholarship. And it was great because you had young people who had won the scholarship come on and talk about it. I mean, you have doctors, lawyers in the past, clergy, um, you know, uh, you have students right now who are in college at LSU, uh, different going through. Was one young lady who was going through medical school. So those scholarships really, really benefited them and the community. And those young people were very grounded. You can tell that they had been taught very well before they actually went to college. And they are very grounded in where they come from. So that was a great event as well. I got the chance to sit back and listen and watch uh, some very good speakers. The food was great, of course. And again, great to hear the actual words from the students who had benefited from those scholarships. It was wonderful. And so that's how I started off my our uh, Black History Month, and a lot of us were talking. Some of my friends and people I converse with in regards to education, and in light of the politics that have been going on for the past couple of years, and especially starting off 2025, we said we're going to make this the blackest Black History of the Month ever. And of course, we said that tongue in cheek, but not really, because again, we don't need a month to celebrate our people, our history, our culture. And again, this goes for any ethnic group, but particularly for Black people in this country. Uh, there's a book I have up on my shelf that's called Our Education Has Always Been Contraband. And it's contraband right now, sanctioned by the United States government and several governments across certain states, Florida in particular. I can name one, Florida, Oklahoma, those places like that, and a few others who are trying to make Black history, learning the actual American history, contraband, meaning something that you shouldn't have, something that should be against the law. But again, people like myself, and you don't even have to be an educator. You don't have to hold one college degree because I remember growing up as a child in the 70s, our churches taught history. You know, I remember being on the tail end of segregated schools in Mississippi. Um, you know, I had all black teachers, administrators. My aunt was a teacher up until probably I got to probably high school. And so we saw Black history in the making. And uh, like I said, the churches that we went to, uh, the teachers were in our churches. So we not only saw them at school, we would see them at church, at certain events in the community. So it was a community thing. It was nothing uh, to separate school from the neighborhood, from church, and for other, again, activities where you would see your school teachers, your principals, your administrators. It was very, very common. Of course, things are very different today, and so we've become so compartmentalized in our living, and so um, people think again that you have to be in a school setting to learn, to learn history and to know our history, or you have to have a college degree. You certainly don't have to have an advanced degree to to learn and to teach history to our kids and to each other, you know. Um, and I could tell you a lot of stuff I had to unlearn in order to learn, and it's something that a lot of people um, don't realize. Certain times, certain things you have to unlearn things in order to learn something new. So, um, but again, February started out great. It went great. Got a chance to talk to several other people in regards to some history, and also talk about current events and how history and current events always are connected. Always are connected. Always are connected. Nothing is new that we're seeing. Uh, and again, I think if you have a firm grip on history, you will know and understand that nothing that we're seeing now in regards to trying to make our history contraband is nothing new. Again, of course, you can go back to uh, plantations, but I'll use the term death camps um, and know that our ancestors were restricted from learning unless it was in support of those people who had them hostage. If they needed something out of them, then they would allow one or two to learn in order to support them. But for the most part, for the good of the people, that's crazy to say, but for the good of the people who they had enslaved against their will, um, they didn't want them to, it was against the law in many places. Black codes prevented those people from learning. But again, uh, since we're no longer in chains, uh, you have these politicians who are trying to go back and put us in mental chains. And we're not just like we're not going to stand for physical change. We're not going to stand for mental change either. But it's up to us to make that happen. And again, and one thing I also find is some people are afraid of learning. Some people are antagonistic to it because they may feel intimidated. But again, all of this information is out here for all of us. And I highly encourage anybody, any and everybody, to start a little library in your home for your kids. You know, I don't have children, but I know it's hard these days. People have to have the phones in their hands, the tablets. The kids got to have the tablets. You got to have the tablets to keep the kids quiet when you're trying to get something done at home or whatever the case may be. But just put a book in their hand. I have some children books up up there, um, like I said, I don't have children, but the illustrations are dynamic. You have some great illustrators of art, but also children's books are great, what we call entry points. You know, you learn about a name, and then that makes you more intrigued to learn just a little bit more. Or you see in the illustration, your children may have talent to draw or to illustrate that will pique their interest. Like I said, a point of entry. There are so many points of entry. And one of the books up there is one of my all-time favorite people, Mr. Paul Robeson. And it outlines his story, illustrates his story of growing up. His father was enslaved. Paul Robeson was born in 1898, and he was talking about the enslavement of his father and how Paul went on to be a great college football player, multi-talented genius. Now, I know we throw the word genius around a lot too much, but Paul Robeson was a genius in my estimation. Just a multi-talented individual, along with his wife Essie. Um, but at the end of their lives, you know, they had a lot of things stripped away from them because Paul Robeson refused, flat out. Paul and his wife Essie refused, okay, to marginalize themselves. And they spoke out wholeheartedly against the atrocities that Black people, not only in this country, but across the world, because Paul Robeson and his wife were international. Okay. He was international stage, singing, acting. Uh, he was a one-man show. So, but him speaking out about the subjugation and oppression of Black people across the globe is what uh, the United States of America did not like. And they tried to say that he was a communist, and they brought him up to Congress to testify during, you know, particularly during the 1950s when communism was the hot button issue. You had the Red Scare and all those things. And any Black person who tried to speak out about what was going on uh, against Black people in this country, they were labeled as communists. But Paul Robeson, W.B. Du Bois, um, uh, Ossie Davis and his wife Ruby Dee, they spoke out against it. They spoke out against it. And so they didn't compromise their integrity. And so Paul Robeson has always and will be uh, somebody who I admire greatly. And uh, being that now we're in March and this is Women's History Month, of course, shout out to all the women in my life who have made me who I am today. Uh, I say thank you. And uh, it's it's been a pleasure just learning from you and being able to be have you me a part of your life. And that goes from my grandmothers, whom I only knew one of my grandmothers. Um, well, actually two, because my mother was given away by her birth mother. I think I met my birth grandmother maybe once. But the woman who raised my mother, only grandmother I ever known, my paternal grandmother transitioned before I was born. And then my mother, my sister, and then of course the person who I would not be without what I am today after 33 years of marriage, my beautiful wife Denise, who uh, is just everything. She's everything. And again, one of the smartest people that I know uh, ever. So I love y'all and I appreciate y'all very much. Uh, and but being a Mississippi native, you know, we've had some great women come through our state. Um, you know, whether it's in sports, education, but as bad as Mississippi was and is to a certain extent, unfortunately, we've had our women and men, of course, but again, this is women, this is March, so we're talking about our women. Two of the greatest women to ever come out of Mississippi, and two of the greatest women to ever this country ever had a pleasure of birthing. One Miss Fannie Lou Hamer and one Miss Ida B. Wells Barnett. Now, when you think about, I'll start with Miss Hamer first, and this is a book. Uh, if you're a fan, or if you really, really want to point an entry to Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, there are plenty of books out there, of course, and these are not the all end all to be alls, but this is a book of Miss Hamer's speeches. And, you know, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer born one of 20 children uh, on a plantation, what I call it, born into a sharecropping family. Again, one of 20 children. And she, in these speeches that she gave, of course, this is after uh, she was essentially, she left her sharecropping home because she was given an ultimatum by the white landowner because Miss Hamer was registering people to vote in Sunflower County and across several other counties in the Mississippi Delta, but in Sunflower County. And the white man who owned the land where Miss Hamer's family was sharecropping gave her an ultimatum. Either you stop registering people to vote or you have to leave this place right now. And Miss Hamer said, well, I'm out of here. She left. And that started her journey on to being one of the ultimate freedom fighters, not only for people in Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta, but people across the world, because she forces the hand, particularly of the Democratic Party uh, in this country. And, when people talk about, the Democratic Party and Republican Party, and people will go back and say, well, Republican Party freed the slaves and the Democratic Party was racist. Well, yes, we know that. But that shows a fundamental misunderstanding that they have of party politics and how those things changed, particularly in the 1960s. So, uh, in 1964, in particular, in regards to Miss Hamer, where she and people like Aaron Henry, um, people of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party forces the hand of the Democratic Party, said, we're going to start our own party. And that was the 1964 presidential election in upheaval. And again, this is where Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, Miss Ella Baker, uh, uh, the strong women of that party dictate that no, we're going to start our own if our demands are not being met through this party. And so Miss Hamer, again, in this book, a lot of speeches she gave, she traveled the country. A lady from the Mississippi Delta traveling the country and the world, speaking on the atrocities of Black people in the Delta. And also remember that she was severely, severely beaten. She was arrested, beaten uh, by the police in jail, and the police made two other Black men beat her almost to death. And she recounts those horrible, horrible stories in the speeches that she gave. And she traveled again the country from Miami, Florida to UC Berkeley in Berkeley, California. She goes to New York, to Harlem, along with El Haj Malik El Shabazz, also known as Mr. Malcolm X. They give a speech uh, together in a church in Harlem. So she was very well respected, uh, again, not only in Mississippi, but across the globe. She travels to Africa, again, connecting the plights of the people, about people on the continent of Africa to our struggle here in the United States. And we have to understand that we have the same oppressor. We have the same oppressor. And we should be working together as coalitions, trying to break those chains literally and figuratively, figurative chains on our freedom. And one quote she always says, and I love to hear her say it, I can listen to that: until I'm free, you're not free either. Okay, you may have heard her say that on some audio tapes from the past, and that's so true. Yeah, that's so true, particularly for Black people across the diaspora, whether you're on the continent of Africa, South America, the Caribbean, um, or here in North America. So, like I said, I of course highly recommend this work. Uh, and again, it recounts her time growing up there on that plantation, and also the speeches that she gave across the country and across the world. So, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer. And again, if you ever take a tour, I would advise and recommend people take a tour of the Mississippi Delta. As tragic as a lot of those things were, it's, I think, a pilgrimage that particularly our Black folks need to take, because I was there last summer and I plan to go back in a couple of months. The it's palpable. It's still palpable, the oppression that went on and still going on. Mississippi can be one of those places where, you know, uh, it's you have some of the best soil up there, particularly in North Mississippi. You have some of the best people, uh, and it could be one of the best places in this country. But again, uh, the certain segment of the population is hell bent on keeping it the way it is. But I would highly encourage you again to take your kids on a road trip through the Mississippi Delta. You're going to eat great, but also you're going to learn. You have again, Rural Mississippi. You have Sumner, Mississippi, the Emmett Till Trail, Emmett Till Interpretive Center. You have Mound Bayou, and I'll talk about that in another video. Um, Mound Bayou started in 1887 by Isaiah Montgomery and his cousin Benjamin Green. Um, Also Clarksdale, Mississippi, the home of the blues. So it's just a lot of things to see, a lot of things to enjoy, and you're going to learn a lot. So I would highly recommend people taking that uh, trip to the Mecca for Black people, that I like to call it, the Mississippi Delta. Now, about 2 hours northeast of Ruleville, Mississippi, is a place called Holly Springs, Mississippi. And Holly Springs was also very prominent during the Civil War. The Union Army came through there. A couple of skirmishes happened in the Holly Springs area in Marshall County, Mississippi. So Holly Springs is notable. But for me, what's most notable about Holly Springs is the birthplace of one Miss Ida B. Wells, Barnett, Ida B. Wells. Okay, born in 1862. Um, Ida B. Wells is a national treasure. Um, and you read her autobiography, Crusade for Justice. Uh, you'll come away, if you don't know any details about Miss Wells, you'll come away astonished and very proud of her courage. And that's the one word that I attribute to Ida B. Wells, is courage. Again, born in 1862 in Holly Springs. And if you ever get a chance to go to Holly Springs, her birth home is still standing, even though it's been renovated by some historical societies. So I think I was there a couple of years. Yeah, I was there a couple of years ago, and now her home is a museum, built, finished in 1858 by her father and the man who owned her father. Her father was named Jim, and Jim was taught masonry and carpentry, and they built Jim. And um, again, some thought that that was his father, but I don't know. I haven't uh, investigated that, but Jim and uh, the elder Mr. Wells built that house. And so again, still standing, but it has been renovated, of course, since then. Now a museum. Like I said, I had the opportunity to go and to visit that, and I'll be going back hopefully this summer as well. But Miss Wells, again, was an orphan. Her both of her parents, Jim and her mother was a cook who was actually brought to Mississippi, I believe, from Virginia, if I remember that correctly, Virginia, or North Carolina. But and so her mother met her father. They got married and had several children. Uh, Miss Ida being one of the oldest, but both of her parents died as a result of the yellow fever that comes through that part of Mississippi. And both of her parents died pretty much at the same time. So Ida and her siblings are left as orphans. So I think her father was part of the Masons, and some of the Masons took some of the kids in. Ida's aunt took some of the kids in, and Ida goes to Memphis, comes back, and then she goes back to Memphis to teach, becomes a teacher. And, she has trouble on the train. A white man tries to assault her on the train, and she sues the train company. She wins, but eventually is overturned in a higher court. But that just starts her trek onto, as she calls it, her crusade for justice. And what also really, really gets her in this crusade in Memphis were two of her friends who owned a grocery store, two black men who owned a grocery store in Memphis, Tennessee, were lynched. Uh, Partly because their grocery store was doing better than the white grocery stores. Okay. And they were lynched. And that really, really disturbed Miss Wells, to say the least. And that really, really stoked her fire uh, in documenting lynchings across the country. Okay. She, a small woman, small black woman, riding a train all across the country, investigating lynchings. Okay. She goes to across the water to London, uh, to Ireland, I think, talking about the treatment that black people were getting in this country, talking about lynching. Okay. And she becomes one of the initial founders of the NAACP in 1909. But um, of course, during that time, you had men who didn't think that women, were, I won't say good enough to be heads of organizations. And also, she was a very fiery person, and that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. But she was no holds barred. She was very, very adamant about we need to stamp out this very deadly issue of lynching of our people. We can't play around with that. And so she also is at very, very odds with Booker T. Washington because she feels he's a pacifist and did not like the type of education in his train of thought in regards to Black people, particularly in the South, that we should be agriculturalists and forget about politics, forget about classical education. We should learn to work with our heart in our hands. Head, heart, and hands. That was Booker T. Washington's motto. Head, heart, and hands. But Ida B. Wells, she she was thoroughly against it. So she was very, very outspoken, not only against white people and what they were doing to black people, but also against a lot of black people because she felt a lot of black people were too lackadaisical about the issue of lynching. And she writes several books about lynching. Particularly the Red Summer of 1919, when black men have gone across the pond to fight in World War One, okay, for the stability of the world, and then they come back and are still being lynched in their uniforms. And so Miss Wells writes extensively about that in this book. Um, and also, she was traveling again across the country on trains with her kids in tow, going to desolate places across the country investigating lynchings, writing about them in the paper, you know. raising the ire of a lot of people who wanted to see her stop. But she kept going. And again, her bravery is something that um, we all need to just have an ounce of that. And so, again, I highly recommend this book. Talks about, again, her relationship with Frederick Douglass, how he was her mentor. She learned a lot of things from him. She worked with him a little bit uh, in certain instances, W.E.B. Du Bois, um, people of that nature. And on the back here, you see her in her older age. She was a head of a lot of civic groups. Uh, and so she was just an extraordinary woman. Marries Ferdinand Barnett later on in life, has children, um, and just a tremendous woman. So, and this, uh, I think a couple of years ago in Chicago, because she ended up moved to Chicago again, marrying Mr. Barnett and having children and residing there. Um, a couple of years ago, they renamed one of the major avenues in Chicago after Miss Barnett. So, just a tremendous, tremendous woman. Both of these women, tremendous women. Again, from my home state of Mississippi, I'm so proud. Even though it was very horrific things that they were fighting against, but yet and still, we have to continue uh, fighting on their behalf. And also, we have to be very cognizant of where we are today. Some people would like to take us back to that, but again, we have to be the stewards of our history. Okay, that history belongs to us, and it's up to us to keep uh, those avenues of communication open. And we can't be afraid of anybody. I don't care what executive orders people write, what laws they try to pass. We don't need open public governmental access, okay, to teach our history to our children. And we have to be very honest that um, during the 80s and 90s, we got too comfortable, okay? And we dropped the ball on a lot of our institutions. And now, one good thing about this administration and other people like it is forcing us to come back to the center, to where African culture, African people is always spreads from the center out, not from the outside in, the center out. In the center of African communities is the home, is the community. You know, our people started educating each other under the trees, you know, didn't have classrooms. Okay. I remember in this book I have here, The Education of Black Folks from 1860 to 1935. And it tells the story of Miss Mary Peak. Immediately after the Union Army uh, wins, no, this was actually before the Civil War was over. 1861, 1862, it tells the story of a woman named Miss Mary Peak, who bombs were going off in the distance, shooting and everything. But she was under a tree with a book teaching those black children and adults how to read because they saw what was coming in, their freedom was coming in all those years that they had been restricted from learning. And while the bombs were going off in the distance, they were under a tree. Okay. And she was reading to them and teaching them how to write the alphabets. So again, going back to that book, our learning and our education has always been contraband. But again, it's up to us to, uh, despite all of that, to keep it going. So I just want to hop on here and talk a little bit about that. Again, I hope your year is going great. And let's continue this um, year of getting back to our educational roots of talking to each other, communicating, community organization, um, finding out ways in order to help improve um, Also the reading skills of our kids and adults as well. Because I saw a study that a lot of young adults who are going from high school to college have never read a book. Have never read a book. And I was astonished with that, but I'm not in the classroom. So uh, that really floored me. Like, man, what is going on out here? But again, it don't take much to think that for the last particularly 20 years, everything has been on this or the computer, and books were thrown to the wayside. But I think they're going to make a comeback. I think the books are going to make a comeback. So let's be on that train as well. So I thank y'all for listening. It's just a few minutes for me to get on here and talk again about the past, our history, why it's important, and how we connect the history to the present and also the future. So thank you for listening. I'll be back to talk about some more things in a historical context. And I hope you guys have a great month of March and the rest of the year. Talk to you later. Bye.